So Alabama wins this game by a score of 38-14. Honestly, the score prediction was very, very similar to what I expected. My score prediction was exactly what happened last year with a 42-10. The field goal that Alabama kicked was because Ryan Williams actually dropped a touchdown pass. So honestly would have been 42-14. I'll take that, right? Wisconsin, credit to them. The touchdown that they did throw was a phenomenal throw. Credit to them for the catch. Obviously, then they also had the kick return touchdown. We'll talk about that here very shortly. But overall, I thought the game happened very similar to what I expected. Wisconsin's run defense was absolutely phenomenal all season. They continued to be that. Honestly, Ty Simpson was our leading rusher, which is shocking. He had the 19-yard rush that put him over to where he had 25 yards rushing. Kevin Riley, continued having a decent game. He did pretty well catching the ball out of the backfield. He just couldn't get a lot going on the ground. I think that there's some offensive line changes that are happening that I expect to maybe make some impact on that. I do think that we have a new starting right tackle. Personally, going into the Georgia game, it would not shock me if we also have a new starting right guard. The guard one, I think, is a little bit more of an open contest. I think the right tackle is Michael Carroll's, but let's get right into that. So, starting up at the top, Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson continued his perfect performance from last week. The first incompletion he had in this game was on a 4th down to Jeremy Bernard. I thought that it was a little bit of pass interference. I thought that the corner had him hooked. It wasn't the worst I've ever seen, so there's a no call. Like I said, I thought they could have called it, but that's Ty's first incompletion. Bray Hubbard opens the game, gets us back the ball with the interception, and Alabama goes on to then score by a very unique play where they, gave Jeremy Bernard the ball on the ground and got a touchdown. I thought that the play calling in this game from Ryan Grubb was really, really good. I thought that there was enough trickeration mixed with enough normal, standard offensive play calls. You saw the double reverse flea flicker wide receiver screen back to Ryan Williams that led to a 75-yard touchdown. You saw the run play to Jeremy Bernard. You saw some other things that was just enough wrinkles to give opposing teams something to look at. But then it also gives you, there was enough of Ty just working in the offense, and I thought that he went through his progressions fairly well. There was only 1 or 2 plays that I thought he kind of got rid of the ball a little quick, and he had somebody, like there was one play where he got off of Isaiah Horton. Isaiah Horton would have had a touchdown. There was one with Lotzier Brooks where I think Lotzier Brooks would have had a touchdown. But then you also did have a drop by Lotzier. You had a drop by Ryan. You had a couple of drops in this game. I think you actually had maybe 2 drops by Ryan. But either way, you had a couple of drops. So, Ty definitely was not a problem in this game. The number 1 key that he had in this game is 4 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. So, Ty Simpson continues his just phenomenal play at quarterback. I knew that you were going to need this in this Wisconsin game just because of how little they've given up on the ground. And I thought that you did a really good job getting that out of your receivers. They talked about it on the broadcast, but clearly the key in this game and the place where Alabama had the biggest mismatch in this game was the receiving core versus Wisconsin's defensive backs. I thought that was evident from the get-go. I thought that Alabama's receiving core, when Ty was playing in rhythm, which was the majority of this game, I thought that Alabama's receiving core just had a lot of separation, was able to do whatever they wanted to do to Wisconsin's defensive backs. Ryan Williams, for everybody that was asking, where is he? He dropped a 3rd touchdown, but he did have 2 touchdowns for 5 receptions for 165 yards. He obviously had that 75-yard touchdown on that screen that I talked about. Had another one where he just made a defender look absolutely silly on a 40-yard touchdown. Just the body control from what we've seen out of Ryan goes back to last year, what you saw in that Georgia game. But what he's able to do with his body and the control that he has of it when he has the ball in his hands is just incredible. That continues. He continues to just be awesome. Jeremy Bernard continues to be Mr. Reliable. He has 4 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. Jeremy is the most consistent guy on our offense if you take out the offensive line. You could also include your center and some. I think your center is probably the other guy that you have to talk about just because of how consistent he has been long term. But I think Jeremy Bernard, from a skill position, is just Mr. Consistent. He's exactly what you need him to be, exactly where you need him to be every time, and Jeremy is awesome. Isaiah Horton finally kind of got into a little more of what we're expecting out of him. He had 5 catches for 48 yards. The touchdown that he had, I thought, was phenomenal ball placement from Ty, and exactly why you want a guy that's 6'4". Ty puts it where only Isaiah Horton at 6'4" can get it. High points the ball, perfect throw, perfect catch. I thought that he really played a really good game. Latzir Brooks had 2 catches for 30 yards. As I mentioned, he did have a drop. He didn't have as big of a game as he had last week, but he is really showing to be that option when you want to keep Ryan on the outside. Latzir is coming in as that slot receiver. When you're wanting to play Isaiah Horton, Jeremy, and Ryan, then obviously Ryan is your slot. But then when you're wanting to have Ryan on the outside, it's really been Ryan, Jeremy, and moving Latzir into the slot, which I think is a big deal. Kevin Riley continues to do very well catching the ball out of the backfield. Cuevas continues to be a big target out of the backfield. Dre Washington and Caleb Edwards came in and caught some passes out of the backfield. Caleb Edwards, obviously your backup tight end. But they also got involved in the passing game. Like I said, I think some of the keys to that is Cuevas is going to be a big target, throughout the whole season. Obviously having a running back catch passes out of the backfield. In this game, it was Kevin Riley. Obviously for that Georgia game, I expect Jam Miller to slide into that starting role. He was said to potentially warm up in this one and then did not actually warming up. So the kind of thought of him playing for that Georgia game is fully on track and fully expected. Additionally, while we're going through injuries, Tim Keenan, potentially they thought was going to warm up and then give it a go. He did not either. And then Jamarian Latham, additionally, did not warm up, did not give it a go. All of those guys are expected to be a full go for Georgia, especially with next week off. So I would expect that from the injury front, Alabama's going to get some guys back. One note to kind of look at on the injury front that I have not seen, and I did not see anybody mention it. I would have to look back and see if DeBoer mentioned it in his press conference, but the broadcast mentioned that LT Overton was potentially sidelined later in this one. So going to have to see what type of impact he had, from an injury standpoint and see what ended up happening. Then we're going to go over to the defensive side of the football. That's a little weird. Alabama recorded 4 sacks. And, for a team that only had 1 sack coming into this game, that was a really big deal. I thought that you had a couple of guys that continued what you had expected to see out of them. We talked about LT Overton. LT Overton was actually able to complete a sack. I thought he'd done a really good job in years past of getting to the quarterback, but not getting the quarterback on the ground. I thought that he did a better job, finishing out the play. I thought London Simmons as a freshman, I thought with Tim Keenan being out, the bull rush where he just kind of mauled their center. I thought he did a really, really good job. Obviously, Wisconsin, they kind of talked about it on the broadcast. At one time was down to their 3rd-string center due to an injury on the field, as well as somebody having issues with snaps. So, but London Simmons took advantage of that. Simmons really did a really good job. Then you had Yonze Pierre and Quay Russaw also both getting in on the sacks. Those are 2 guys that I really think are going to have big impacts long-term this season if you think that you're going to be able to get to the quarterback at the level that we're expecting. I think Quay Russaw is a guy where, for the team to continue to play as well as it can, I think that he's a guy that you really need to see a big game out of. He's one that I would look to see the coaching staff kind of challenge going into that Georgia game because, again, you're going to need to be able to get to the quarterback without having to bring a ton of pressure because the quarterback can beat you, right? You want to make sure that you're getting to the quarterback while keeping as much in the back end as absolutely possible. Then we have to talk about Bray Hubbard. Bray Hubbard, for good reason, was ridiculed after the Florida State game. His effort was not where he wanted it to be, where he needed it to be. He owned up to that. He talked about that. But since that game, he has absolutely turned the corner. Bray Hubbard has looked like a completely different player these last 2 weeks. This week specifically, he was the player that we saw at the end of last season. Bray Hubbard comes up with 2 interceptions, was flying all around the field, delivering big hits, was in on a ton of plays. I thought that Bray Hubbard was exactly what we thought Bray Hubbard was going to be coming into this season. I thought what I saw on tape coming out of the Florida State game was not the Bray Hubbard I saw, at the end of last season when Keon Sabb was out. And I think that the Bray Hubbard that I've seen in that Wisconsin game is the Bray Hubbard that you saw at the end of last season. He's playing that safety position with a lot of skill, right? He doesn't look like he's playing on his heels. It looks like he knows exactly where he needs to be. He's reacting to the football, right? Both interceptions, he was just in the perfect position, made a play on the football, became the receiver, showed great hands. At the end of the day, like I said, Bray Hubbard, should have and did get ridiculed for what happened at the end of, or what happened in that Florida State game. But if you're going to ridicule him, you have to give him the praise when he does what he did, right? He has turned a new leaf. He has done what he should do as a football player, and he is playing the right way. And so credit to him, right? Now, Bray was interviewed after this game and was asked about the defense's effort and such. He talked about how the defense was upset because the standard was 0 points. They were upset that they gave up that long touchdown pass to Wisconsin. I understand that, and that absolutely makes sense if you're going to play against a schedule like you're going to play against in the SEC and against quarterbacks like you're going to play against. You have to set the standard to absolute perfection because the guys you're going to play against are going to make you pay if you're not perfect. So I understand what he meant by that, and I want that to be the standard. But I think that in and out of itself shows you kind of the mindset that these guys are taking into it. I know a lot of people talk about, oh, you lost a game. Well, 0-0 is your record going into the next week. It really feels like through these last 2 games that the team is really taking that to heart. Obviously, Louisiana Monroe is not somebody that Alabama should struggle with, and they did not. But then Wisconsin, I think for huge percentages of this game, Alabama was fully locked in and really played absolutely phenomenally well. It's worth noting that Wisconsin drove the ball 2 times, or I guess 1 time really, and the ball was intercepted by Bray Hubbard to shut down that drive. The 2 touchdowns was a kick return because of a poor penalty on the Ryan Williams touchdown. Guy on the sideline runs into an official, gets all your kickoff coverage messed up. The guy returns it for a touchdown. And then you have the long touchdown, which, as I mentioned previously, was just a phenomenal throw by the quarterback. The defensive back could have gotten their hips around, right? Like, you could have located the football, but I thought that the quarterback just placed it exactly where it needed to be. And, sometimes that's just going to happen. So I'm not too upset by the 2 explosives. Obviously, you're trying to limit the explosives as much as possible, but the fact that an explosive happened, and that's how the touchdown happened, I can live with that. It did not feel like you just got beat, right? It felt like, hey, somebody had an explosive, you got to move on and go to the next play. And I thought that that's what Alabama did. I was very excited to see the 4 sacks. I think that going into, this being your real last non-conference before going into your SEC slate, obviously I know you have another non-conference before the end of the season, not worried about that, but being able to turn a corner against your Power 5 competition, this is another, no matter what people are going to talk about Wisconsin, I understand this is not the Wisconsin that was competing at the top of the Big Ten, but this, at the end of the day, this is still a Power 4 team, and the fact that you were able to do to Wisconsin what I thought you should be able to do to Wisconsin, but you were also able to get those sacks, right? Wisconsin really prides themselves in the trenches, so the fact that you were able to get 4 sacks, the fact that you weren't able to run the ball great, But that's okay. I still think you were able to get some success running the football, enough to be able to open up some play actions and stuff, right? It was by no means was it the best running the football, and that's the last thing I wanted to talk about was I mentioned it earlier, but I think the running the football got substantially better when you brought in Michael Carroll and Jaden Roberts for I believe it was for Geno Vandermark and Wilkin Formby. Now, if Vandermark needs to replace Cam Dewberry, that's a whole different discussion. I saw that Vandermark switched with Dewberry. So then you had Proctor, Vandermark, Parker, Jaden, and Michael Carroll. If that's what you need to do, I'm okay with that. I'm not as concerned about the left guard position. I thought that Cam's been fine. But if you think that Geno deserves that spot, I'm okay with that. But I think that no matter what, I think that Michael Carroll is your answer at right tackle. I think that he's shown that through these last two games. I think that when you look at the time that Ty has had in the pocket under Michael Carroll versus Wilkin Formby, I think that Michael Carroll is just better. When you're looking at running the football, when Alabama did have a couple of bigger runs under Kevin Riley had that 11-yard run. That was when Michael Carroll and Jaden Roberts were on that right side of the line and opened up that gap for him. I think that you run the football better with those guys. I think that Michael Carroll has been better in pass protection. I think that Michael Carroll has earned the first team reps. It would not at all shock me, and honestly, I'm expecting to see Michael Carroll get the start versus Georgia. I know it's on the road. I know it would be a freshman on the road getting his first start. I still think Michael Carroll gets the start. That's my personal opinion. I think that even if he doesn't, I think that Michael Carroll comes in, and by midway through the season, it is undeniable that Michael Carroll is your starting right tackle. And I think that Michael Carroll is that good of a guy. I think he is going to be your starting right tackle. He is going to be this future successor to Caden Proctor when Caden Proctor eventually goes to the league after this season. Michael Carroll is turning into that dude on the offensive line, and he is somebody that is, through his play, becoming undeniable, and you've just got to have him out there. I thought that Carroll's, what he's done in the run game and in the pass game has been absolutely incredible. So I've been very, very impressed with what I'm seeing out of him and very excited to see what it will look like when we take on Georgia in 2 weeks. As I mentioned, if you're interested in all the content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We will be talking to Max Barr this upcoming week. Katie Wyndham will come on next week to talk Georgia. I will see. I know I will have one episode coming out this week. If I can put something together, I may have two. It may be a one episode week just with the off week. I may try to do a little bit longer one with Max Barr and have that be the one episode for this upcoming week. But I will let you guys know when I record that episode with Max Barr if I am going to do 1 or 2 episodes this upcoming week. But thank you guys so much for all the support. I really have appreciated it. I know a lot of people are really interested in the basketball commits. We did have 3 guys on campus this upcoming for this Wisconsin game. Caleb Holt, Dylan Mingo, and Jackson Richardson. As soon as I hear additional information come out about them and about how those visits went, I will be sure to share it. Thank you so much, everyone, for supporting. I really do appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.